All right, and we're live. So we should now see a stream pop up on, on Facebook and on YouTube as well. Yes, it's working. Perfect. So we can now see people. And we have someone commenting. Nice. Few minutes from now. So we have people saying, hello Broom, hi Thailand Magazine, welcome. It's working indeed, perfect. So we see people join on all the platforms. Let me see here, yep, perfect. All right, all the comments here. Hi everyone, of course we'd like to know again where you're from, so when joining do say hi, tell us where you're joining us from. There's no prizes here, but we still like to know who's the furthest away from us.
I guess the prizes are fast internet connections and low latency if you're nearby, and the joy of being maybe at 4 a.m. or 11 p.m. if you're not. It's not the best prizes.
Oh well, at least it's something.
Yeah,
The Hague. Sorry, Joost, you're not winning. I see Bonaire joining, Serbia joining. Thailand Magazine is in the Netherlands. Paris, Athens, Atlanta. All right. So that's a lot of people joining. Quebec.
Quebec's a good one.
Yeah, Montreal. All right, Germany. Yeah, that's all over. But we're mainly focused on Europe still, it seems. Rockford. Nice. Saudi Arabia. Now we're getting somewhere. Albuquerque, New Mexico. Nice. All right. So, with a lot of people joining us right now, let me start with a quick introduction of our two speakers for today. You've probably seen them before if you attended previous webinars, or maybe you've seen their avatars around if you're in WordPress or in SEO or anywhere on the web, because they show up everywhere. So the first person I would like to introduce for today is Joost de Valk. Is this the point where I can unmute you, Joost?
I have unmuted myself.
Perfect. All right, Joost is the founder of Yoast and our CPO. So he's responsible for the product at Yoast. And Jono is a digital strategist, marketing technologist, and full stack developer. And both are technical SEO geeks, I can say. And they keep up with all the SEO news so that you don't have to. So I would say give them a big hand, make it a virtual one, because here are Yoast and Jono.
Thank you very much. Taco, who we didn't introduce, you should get a little intro as well. Taco is the one responsible for holding all this together and babysitting us. And I did notice a comment there saying, Taco, you didn't say where you were in all of the geographic introductions. So, international man of mystery.
Yeah, Taco and I are in the same city, so that's relatively easy, isn't it? We've started, so maybe I should switch to the next slide. Because we have all this here, but we're not going to use it. We have tons of news, I noticed. So
again, it's another week where it felt quiet, and then it turns out it's been a lot of stuff.
It does, yeah. There's a lot of things to talk about. So we're going to start as usual with a lot of Google news, and the first one was quite surprising because suddenly, out of nowhere, I found myself watching Google's Search On event, which, had they announced that?
About 2 days before, kind of out of the blue. Yeah, this was really unexpected. So this was instead of their annual Google I/O conference, which is usually their bit like the equivalent of the Apple event. It's announce all the shiny toys, get everyone very excited, which for obvious reasons isn't happening this year. But yeah, there was no advertised replacement. This just popped up on, I think it was like the Wednesday night. Like, here's our most important product announcement of the year. It'd be Friday evening. Come and watch.
Yeah, and it was like the most ridiculously gorgeously produced thing. It was like sleek. It was very slick. It was very well done. But they announced a lot of stuff. Anything in particular we need to highlight here, or shall I just go to the next slide with all the examples?
Let's do the examples. I think that there was. So I guess there was a mix of things we already know about that they just summarized and kind of brought back into the spotlight, and there were some new bits they announced, and a lot of it focused, at least in part, around this bit, which is how so the framing was very much we're now using AI a lot, which, depending on your definition of AI, and it varies, but and we know that they've been using this kind of stuff for a while, but they're really honing in on this mission and this statement that their ability to process and understand the web is getting better and better and better.
Yeah, so they're using BERT models on now almost every single English sentence, which I thought was a fun way for them of saying we do this only on multi-query things, or multi-word queries, because on single word queries it doesn't really make sense to do this. But yeah, so they are now using a slightly different model of understanding content than they were before. I think it's actually it is a fairly big change in many ways, even though the direct impact on rankings doesn't seem that huge.
Yeah, and I think so. The two things we should clarify. One is BERT, I'm sure we've talked about before, but the principle is they now look at and understand the context of all the words in relationship to each other. So they look at each bit of the query and what's around it, and they can use that understanding to match it. So in the example screenshot, it's really important for that query that you understand the direction of travel. Otherwise, you get bad results. And the reason this is really important is that this is another big step towards them not just providing a list of search results and a list of links you have to choose from, but a step towards them solving your problem, understanding it well enough to just give you the solution rather than giving you a set of search pages that you've got to filter through yourself.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It is actually a big deal, but well. And then there was this whole thing about them indexing passages. So what you see in the screenshot is on the left is what it was before, and on the right is what Google now says is the after for queries like this, where they have switched from saying this page is relevant or not to saying this page might not be relevant in total, but this particular paragraph on this page is relevant. Then there was a whole kerfuffle among SEOs about whether they're indexing passages separately or not, and I don't really care. I think what we do care about is, okay, this change is a very real one. This is a paragraph in the after one that is somewhere halfway down that page, that they're highlighting. So they're highlighting a very particular paragraph in some sort of featured snippet, but a new type of featured snippet. And I have all sorts of questions on this, which we'll probably only be able to answer once this goes live. But in my opinion, if they're going to do it like this, then single sentence paragraphs are basically out of the window because they will never be used like this. So you shouldn't have those. How important is readability in all of this? Because they use this for voice search as well, I presume. So there's a lot of things that we need to look at this for, I think.
Yeah, it rewards a very specific type of content structure, right? I have a page that might just be information or content suddenly needs to be structured and read much more like a guide explicitly, and then each bit needs to be its own section and have its own very specific focus, which changes the kind of layout and structure of that page. So it's definitely something we'll be thinking about a lot more. But I don't think it's that alien from what we say already, which is plan and structure the page logically, have clear sections, make sure each paragraph talks about the thing and has a clear structure. It's just you've really got to double down on that if you want to get these kinds of results.
Yeah. This was interesting. But I might want to move my mouse out of the way, but I can't really do that. There we go. What is this? Tell me, Jono.
Tell me, Jono. Busyness. What a great word, right? I remember distinctly in school getting told off in business studies for spelling business that way once. So this is the extension of Google Maps and Google My Business and Google Ads encroaching on the real world, which I think is a bit scary, but also pretty awesome. So they talked about part of this a while ago, which is the bit you see in the image, which is rather than having to look at your phone to follow a map for directions, you hold your phone in front of you and it superimposes information and arrows and turn left here signs so that you move, you look through your phone rather than at your phone. That feels like part of a bigger revolution where augmented reality is where all the big companies are wanting to compete, right? Facebook, Twitter.
I want my Google Glass, but then with that, I mean, that would actually be bloody helpful.
Yeah, no, it really would. So the new bit they've added, there's this busyness idea, which you get bits of in the Google Maps results already. It will tell you how busy local businesses are and how likely it is to be busy now based on the time of day and all the data that they have that they collect from things like Android devices running Google Maps, watching people search for stores and then travel in the real world. They collate all this information. And now when you point your phone at a restaurant, it will say, this is quite quiet, or this is currently closed, and all this rich extra information. It's a huge step to moving Google out of the search box and into the real world, which is where their next big fight is.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. It is. It's also a bit scary because I know how easy it is to game this stuff.
Yes.
So this is going to be abused, and we're going to see people abuse this on their competitors, etc., for a while before that Google realizes that that's the case. So that bit scares me a bit.
Yep.
And then we had one more that they launched, Journalist Studio. Now this is always the thing that gets me. It's Google is trying so hard to prove that they're not killing news.
Yep.
By putting out all these tools that are supposed to help news publishers. The problem, however, is not that they're killing news. The problem is that they're killing the news business model by killing their advertising model. And they're never fixing that.
No.
So Google is doing this, Facebook's doing this, to the point where now Google and Facebook are spending more money on news than these companies themselves are, because they have a lot more of it. But it is very. I don't think there's a good solution to this yet. But at the same time, this is a very cool collection of tools.
Yeah, they're great resources. They just don't solve the problem, which is Google's core model removes the incentive for people to produce news because they can't monetize it. And nobody really seems to have an answer as to how you fix that. And better resources for writing news is one very small part of that, but not the significant part.
No.
There was one extra bit that they launched, which we didn't have in our notes, which I'm really keen to add, which is you can now hum to search.
Yeah,
that was really cool.
Yeah, so you can literally, to your Google app, you can hum, and then you can hum a song, and then it will tell you which song you've just hummed at it, which is awesome for when you have this song in your head, but you don't know what song it is anymore, which never happens to me with Beatles songs.
That's nice. It looks like a trivial thing, but it's another step for them moving away from Google being a search box that you type a query into and get a list of links. Google is a personal assistant which solves your problems. Yeah,
Yeah.
one of our colleagues has just very cleverly said, "Is this the hummingbird update?" Which was a previous Google update. Yeah, good work, good work. Everyone else got there first.
Okay. So they announced all of this because all of this was in that Google On event that they announced 2 days before, apparently. I had missed that. What had happened to me literally is I opened up my YouTube app and I suddenly saw that live stream and just fell into it and started pinging Jono on WhatsApp, who was already watching because he's always a bit more in tune than I am. But yeah, no, it was very funny. Anyway, so that was all in one event, but there's more. There were new Google Quality Raters guidelines.
Yeah, and if you haven't read these and you have a large chunk of time spare and you're particularly interested, they are worth digging into. Let's
explain a bit more about what this is. Google has a team, a rather large team.
10,000 employees at last count?
Yeah, of people all over the world who manually review results and say whether something is good or bad, not to change those individual results, but to see whether the algorithm is doing what it should be doing. So basically they have a machine learning model that they're constantly training by having 10,000 people constantly review their model. And at the same time, they give those people reviewing their model a set of guidelines as to what the model should be doing. If this sounds too complex for you, this is exactly why I have a problem calling this AI. It's not. It is people teaching other people how to train a computer. What they do is constantly revise those Google Quality Rater guidelines. So that for the people doing these quality rating, they give them guidelines on how to rate these things. And every time they change them, we can look at, okay, so what have they changed? What are they looking differently at? And there were quite a few changes this time that I thought were interesting, but the most interesting one is indeed the emphasis on, are your needs met when you go to this page?
That's such a profoundly different way of thinking about. So if I'm a business owner or webmaster, I'm trying to write and optimize pages to rank for queries and to have a high conversion rate and to sell my products or my services. It's very rare for people to be authoring web content and thinking, is this solving the problems of my users? Because that might not mean selling them the thing or getting them to fill out the form. But that's what Google are trying to judge and reward. Are these pages meeting the expressed needs of these people? And quite often that's not the case. So yeah, as a way of making sure that you're thinking the same way that Google is, it's worth at the very least skimming this and asking these kinds of questions. Does this page meet the needs of a user who is confused or doesn't know what questions to ask or doesn't understand my product space? Because if all you're doing is trying to convert or rank, then you're not going to get that first bit, which means you never get to that now I can sell them stuff stage.
Yeah, I agree. And I did a whole presentation on WordCamp Bulgaria last Saturday where I talked about this as well, which is now on WordPress TV. See my profile on Twitter. I've just retweeted it, but yeah, there's a lot more thinking to do about this for a lot of people, I think. And then we had the fun bits, because there's no month of Google news wherein Google does not get sued for something. But this is pretty big.
This is the biggest one yet, I think.
Well, at least in the US. I mean, in Europe, it's been different. But this is, for the first time, the US going, hey, maybe we've actually let go a bit too much here.
Yeah, and I guess we don't want to dive too much into the politics, but it's interesting looking at both sides of this argument briefly. So the arguments against Google are they use their existing reach and user base and size and platform and technology and money to gain an unfair advantage in other areas. For example, They like Google Chrome is the only like one of the only browsers in the world. YouTube is the biggest video search engine. Google Shopping is now getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And Google can make these products successful in part because they're already so huge in other areas like Google Ads, like Google Search. Google's argument against that being unfair is you can choose your own search engine, you can use other browsers, there are other things out there. But then Google got to where they got potentially unfairly without regulation. It all gets a bit tangled up, and there's money moving in multiple different directions between Apple and Google and news institutions, and it's really unclear. What do you do when you have an accidental oligarchy? How do you unpick that? And nobody really knows.
It is. Their public policy response was this.
Yeah, we just do good stuff, right?
And I was looking at this and I was like, this is so... They would never dare to respond like this to the European Union.
Yeah.
It's so typical. Because whether or not this helps consumers is actually, in a monopoly case, not the most important thing. It is whether you're allowing other people to also build a business.
Yeah.
And so, they're steering away from that immediately, which I would call spin. But at the same time, this is hard because a lot of these things are, not necessarily simple to do. And they're building some of the hardest tech ever built because they can do what they do. But are they using their advantage in search to sometimes promote other stuff? Well, to be honest, I think yes, they are.
But then conversely, they're using some of those connections to build better products. Like Google Maps is connected to YouTube, is connected to other bits, and they're all better for that.
Yeah, I agree. So this is a very hard discussion. Anyway, the new Google Analytics. Now, I'll be very honest. I have not played with the new Google Analytics yet. The only thing I see, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jono, is that you cannot connect the new Google Analytics to Google Search Console yet.
Oh, can you not? I hadn't caught that. So I've been playing with the beta for since it came out, which might be as long as about a year now. It has a lot of potential, but I don't think it's a fully baked product yet. So one of my greatest frustrations with Google Analytics, which I love as a product, is that they've not really meaningfully improved it in about a decade. Like, they've changed the designs a bit, but they've not really challenged what it is and how it works. This is the big overhaul. This is the burn it all, reinvent, start again. It's just still missing some features. Like, we do a lot of stuff with Google Analytics on some of our sites, and we can't quite replicate that in the new one yet. So I think another few months and it'll be there. But this is, there's so much cool stuff this does that's just next generation. It's really awesome.
Cool. If you have a question, do please share it in the comments. We'll highlight it later on and try to answer it. Google is pushing web stories. We talked about this last time. Hilariously, we did a story on web stories on the Yoast.com blog, and it's by far the best performing story on Google Discover that we've had in the last few months. So Google Discover is very good to talk about Google Discover.
It's like Google Plus being good for people who work at Google and SEOs, isn't it?
But it is very cool. And the Web Stories plugin, we talked about that last time. I would really urge you to check it out. It is pretty cool.
Yeah, this is a big deal. If you're in a space where you can do that kind of Instagram style visual publishing, this is really going to be where the interesting stuff happens. Like, this is Google taking on Pinterest, Instagram, all of those types of platforms.
Yeah. This one had me laughing because Google dropped temporarily, they say, the request indexing feature in Google Search Console. So you can no longer submit a URL to get it indexed manually. And I'm in quite a few Facebook SEO groups. And in more than a few, people were asking, how do I get my stuff indexed now? And I was like,
yep.
Because
if
honestly,
you're-
if you need that feature more than once a year, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Your stuff on your website should be indexed because you link to it, not because of any other reason. So the fact that this thing still exists, and it now doesn't anymore, was in my eyes, I'm like, well, we use it sometimes to quickly test things. That's what it was useful for. But other than that, you shouldn't really need this. You shouldn't need this to get your site indexed. Because if you do, if you can only get it indexed by telling Google to say, hey, go index this, then it'll never rank because it doesn't have links.
Or you have other technical problems with your site, like you've got a billion pages that shouldn't exist, or you've got some kind of fundamental technical issues, which you shouldn't have if you're running on a decent WordPress host and running Yoast, for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was cool, but it was also sort of funny when we saw that. Oh, yeah, and this was another one where the Facebook SEO groups went hilariously nuts over absolutely nothing in my regard.
Yeah.
So Google has been talking about mobile-first indexing for quite a while. We've been blogging about it for quite a while. What apparently shocked some people is that mobile-first now means that if stuff is not on your mobile view, but only your desktop view, that stuff will no longer be used for ranking. With a few caveats, because if you can get to that on that page, so if it's on a tab or something, they will actually index it and they will use it for ranking. But if it's not available on the mobile page, then they won't use it for ranking. Well, I don't see how that's news because they've been telling us that for a year.
Yeah, they have. And there's still a surprising amount of sites out there which either have an m.dot subdomain for their mobile site, which you really shouldn't ever have been doing. And if you still are, you need to sort that out. But the problem with that is then the assumption is you also have a desktop site, which Google isn't going to look at. And the m.dot site will quite often be slimmed down, have less content, have fewer moving parts. Or you have a site which does that same kind of logic and says, oh, we've detected it's a mobile device, let's get rid of this sidebar. But if that sidebar contains internal links or content or other elements, Google's not going to see that if you're getting rid of it. So yeah, really, their mobile first view of the world is the only view that matters.
Yeah, which I think was clear a year ago. But
yep.
And then the last thing from our Google News section, Google Shopping will soon be free all over the world. Now, this is one of those things where I can see the problem coming in later on. Because everybody will get used to traffic from Google Shopping. And then slowly but surely, you'll start to have to pay to get traffic from Google Shopping. And never completely, but slowly but surely, more and more ads will creep in. That's probably how this is going to work.
And the other thing that might happen is with all the stuff they're doing with schema around e-commerce and products, is they might just put more and more of the whole e-commerce product into the search engine. Like you can add something to your cart, you can buy it, you can check your delivery information without ever leaving the search engine. And that might create a bit of a race to the bottom on price or availability, which is going to eat into people's margins in exactly the same way. So yeah, whilst this is free, it's the beginning of a marketplace that's going to end up squeezing people somewhere.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is very much. Okay, that was the Google bit of what we have, but we have a lot more, so let's move straight on. Now, the first thing is actually already shown in our opening slide here, because this used to be Bing News. And now it's Microsoft Bing News because they've rebranded that. But we'll cover that after we cover this.
Nice. So I complain every time we do one of these sessions that Bing isn't innovating. They've launched a new feature and it's a carbon copy of something Google do, but not as good. This is innovation, finally.
Yeah, it's very cool.
So this is their Site Explorer, which is part of their Search Console Webmastery Tools stuff. And part of me thinks it really isn't innovative. Like what they've done is they've shown me a tree structure of my site and they allow me to get stats on it, which technically isn't anything particularly impressive, but Google doesn't do this. And it's actually really useful. If I've got a site that's well structured where everything's in folders, now I can go and see how does Bing see my site? Where are there bits I didn't realize were a bit tangled? How are those bits performing? Where are there errors? It's really nice. It's the same kind of thing you might get in a SEO tool like a Screaming Frog or a Sitebulb or any of those crawlers, but in Bing, so you're getting, almost said in Google, in Bing, so you're getting it directly from them, which means you're not having to have some third party interpret it, which is really useful.
Yeah, so this is, in many ways, looking at this is very important to do every once in a while, because there's not very often that you get the chance to look at how a crawler perceives your site this way. And if there's one thing that the Bing crawler does pretty well is emulate Google in how it crawls. I mean, they basically do work in the same way. So I think this is a very cool new thing, and it's nice. And then they've rebranded as Microsoft Bing, which I thought was hilarious, because this is like the fifth rebrand in the last decade.
Count. Yeah, they need to admit that. Yeah, I feel a bit sorry for them with this kind of constant struggle for identity. I was just reading the announcement post on this, and I kind of get where they're coming from. They're saying that, in fact, even a step back from that. So Bing's marketing strategy is always to repeatedly say, we're not as small as you think we are. By the way, we also power Cortana and everything you do on your Xbox and every Microsoft Windows search. Okay, fine. But the rebrand is to try and really align with this and to say that Bing is an integral part of the Microsoft ecosystem. It powers all of these different tools and systems and platforms. It's connected to your Microsoft Word documents and all of these things. And I think positioning it that way is kind of nice. You go, if I'm a Windows person and I'm bought in on Windows, then this is part of the Microsoft ecosystem. Fine, okay.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for them to say, okay, now it's Microsoft Bing, and then 2 years from now they'll rebrand it as Microsoft Search.
Yeah. So that I was just one of the examples in the release document is that Bing powers the map system in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Like, that really isn't a search engine at that point. This is just a big data warehouse that happens to have a search box on it. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And they've also done something pretty cool. But if you think, hey, if I swapped that logo out for a Google logo, it would look absolutely the same.
Yeah.
You'd be right.
Yep.
It is shocking to me. It's like, do something new. And I'm not giving them enough credit, because the team there are very good and awesome people, and we like them a lot, because we actually do talk to Fabrice and the head of Bing and a couple of other people fairly regularly. They're very nice people that are working very hard on solving incredibly hard computer information science problems. But it does feel a bit like, we're doing that as well. We're doing that as well the whole time.
Yep.
Which might not be totally fair on them. But then Facebook had a tiny bit of news. Not all that much news out of Facebook. There probably is more, but this is pretty cool.
Yeah, conceptually it's quite hard to wrap your head around, right? So conventionally, the way you would translate a language is you have a frame of reference. You have some kind of document that says, this is the word for coffee in one language, this is it in another, and you build all those relationships. And in a lot of those cases, you end up using English as a kind of neutral middle ground, for better or worse, especially when you're training AI systems and machine learning systems. You need that intermediary step. Facebook's model just converts on the fly. I'm sure Google did something relatively similar last year, was it? Where they said for the first time they've had a language be translated with an entirely machine generated interstitial. But now Facebook is saying that they do that with 100 languages. So they can invent and translate and solve language problems on the fly without needing to go through that cumbersome step of, okay, here's an English frame of reference. And in practical terms, that's faster, it's cheaper, it's more efficient, but it also means that doing another 500 languages is much easier than it would have been otherwise. So this really is a good step in kind of general translation technology and language technology.
So my universal translator will someday exist.
Yep, and it will be in Microsoft Bing, Skype, Search, Windows Tool, or whatever it's called.
If you don't know what a universal translator is, you need to watch more Star Trek.
Yeah, they're not the new series. It's very disappointing.
The new series is awesome. Discovery is awesome. And the one on Prime is awesome too. Anyway, so WordPress news. I'm actually very, very, very proud of this one. So we have in our team a WordPress team. So within Yoast, we have a team of people dedicated to WordPress core. And that team has been working on 2021, the new default theme for WordPress that'll ship with the upcoming WordPress 5.6 release. And we've actually made that team a bit bigger for the last few weeks to make sure that we ship this on time. We will ship this on time. I'm already running the new 2021 theme on Yoast.blog, as in JOOST.blog. It's awesome. It's very simple, almost to the point of being bland, in a way, but it's very, very fast. It does everything a theme needs to do. And yeah, I'm just pretty happy with it. So yeah, check it out. Check it out on Yoast.blog. I've not updated it for 2 days. So
I was just looking at that. You've not fixed the image bug that we've been working on for about 2 days with the heights. The images are a bit skewed, but that aside,
how's that possible? So I might still be testing things, so you'll see my live tests go wrong. But yeah, no, it is pretty cool. And WordPress 5.6 is looking to be a pretty solid release with no real huge big features that are user facing and that important. But there's some stuff in there that I'm really looking forward to. The application for the REST API. So for those of you who do anything headless or something like that, there will be application-specific passwords now in WordPress core, where a user can add an application-specific password for a specific app integrating with WordPress. I think that opens up an entire new set of types of applications that you can build on top of WordPress.
I think it's worth focusing on that for a second. It's something we don't talk about a lot. Just briefly then. So WordPress is conventionally a blogging platform and a CMS, but there's no reason why it can't also be a database system for managing your fridge, or for running city transport, or for powering other arbitrary apps and systems. Like, it needs a bit of bending and tweaking, but it can be a piece of software that runs other web stuff. And one of the big things that's held it back from really breaking out into that space is the ability to manage passwords and security around those kind of communication pipelines. So this, whilst it doesn't feel like a lot, opens up an entirely new type of WordPress thing, which is awesome. Yeah,
I'm really happy with that. And then another personal victory for me and Jono is that on WordPress, WordCamp.org, we've done what's probably one of the biggest SEO projects ever. We didn't do it. Ian Dunn was kind enough to do all the work, but we proposed it. So we've gone from having a URL structure like 2020.nl.wordcamp.org to nl.wordcamp.org/2020, which means that instead of having a new domain for every year, we have only a new domain for every WordCamp, which makes a world of difference in how Google indexes that site. And we're already seeing the benefits of that, but I'm looking forward to increasing that even more. And it was a pretty big, nice win for ourselves. I don't know whether we had a slide on that one, to be honest, but we do have a slide on Cloudflare, who last time we spoke about this, we actually we congratulated Cloudflare on their 10 years, and then we knew this was coming, but they hadn't released it yet. But automatic platform optimization is basically well, what's a good way to explain it, Jono?
That's a good question. I mean, it does what it says on the box. So you get a Cloudflare account set up, which takes 5 minutes, and you turn this feature on, which I think costs $10 a month, and they just speed your site up. They do a whole bunch of the stuff that Cloudflare already does, like shrinking your images and optimizing your JavaScript. But this is a layer of WordPress specific optimization. So they cache your pages if you're not logged in, and they close some security holes, and they do some other bits and pieces. And there's people reporting things like 90% faster initial loading times and 60% smaller pages, and this goes on and on and on. And it's the kind of stuff that you could have done yourself if you had the right combination of plugins and time and budget and expertise. But it's just so easy just to go in and turn this on, and it just.
Well, it's also because this costs like what, $5 a month, right?
Yeah. So versus the time even to learn about this sort of stuff.
Yeah, but it's like it. It's always worth it to go for slightly cheaper hosting and add this on, because the combination will almost always be faster than whatever your host can do.
Yeah. And that's the big change, isn't it? So we always say don't have cheap shared hosting, and make sure you invest a sensible amount. Maybe that threshold of between good and great hosting stops mattering quite as much, because a lot of what you would pay extra for, you don't need now because it's all served from Cloudflare.
Yeah.
You still need a good host, though.
You still need a good host for lots and lots of reasons, but mostly security. But it is, this can really speed up your site quite a lot. So it is cool stuff. And then we had some stuff of our own. In 15.1, we launched SEMrush. Or SEMrush, or I don't know how to say this. We always say SEMrush here, but that's very Dutch, I guess. But it is SEMrush. What we've built together is an integration where you can get related key phrases from SEMrush straight in the editor while you're writing your post, and you can do. On a free account, you can do 10 requests a day, which doesn't seem like all that much, but at the same time, it's quite. If you're just normally writing, it's actually fun stuff, and it should be enough. If you're writing a bit more, then maybe it might not be enough, and then you'll need a paid SEMrush account. But I think it's exciting. It's the first new feature that we built together. There's probably more to follow that we can do on integrating direct data into Yoast SEO. And it's a cool team to work with, so I'm looking forward to doing more with it.
Yeah, very cool.
And then today we had a release that had some cool new stuff. Swedish word form support. So if you're writing in Swedish, we now recognize your plurals when you're writing single, when you have singles, or the other way around. A lot of cool stuff like that. And enhanced Slack sharing, which is something that I built a couple of weeks ago, and was incredibly funny to see. From a technical perspective, it's very, very geeky. It uses Twitter metadata that Twitter doesn't use itself anymore, but because it's old, but Slack still uses. It's very cool. If you use Slack and you have a blog running Yoast SEO, update Yoast SEO on your blog, share a URL from your blog on Slack, and you'll see that there is now both the author and an estimated reading time being shared alongside your snippet and post image. So that's pretty cool. With that, I think we've covered our news, and we have. I've seen a lot of questions scroll by already, so I'm going to let Taco take the lead in pushing them to us.
Yeah,
if he unmutes himself.
That does help, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yes. So let's stay on topic on Yoast SEO. It was a very early question in the show by Peter. Can the Yoast plugin be installed on any website? Because he already used it on his blog.
Yeah, I saw this come by. Sorry, Peter. No, we can't install. You can't install it on any website. If you're lucky enough to run Typo 3, then yes, you can. If you're not that lucky, then I'm sorry. And you should just switch your publishing site. To be honest, any publishing site not on WordPress is probably spending tons and tons of money reinventing stuff that's already been built for WordPress. So switch to WordPress.
All right, and also related to our plugin, is there any chance of Norwegian support?
Absolutely, Annette. I did a webinar for friends in Norway recently where we had like 400 people attending as well, a ridiculous amount of people considering how many people live in Norway. But yes, Annette, we fully intend on adding Norwegian support. I honestly don't know the planning yet on where it is on our roadmap. I will look that up in between now, though.
All right. Meanwhile, we had a few questions on the new Google Analytics. And the one was, what's the advantage? And the other one by Jade was, so does it mean you advise people not to pass to Google Analytics 4 for now?
Interesting. So what's the advantage? It's much more flexible. It's much more powerful. It gives you a whole bunch of freedom around understanding how do people move around and do things in your site in a way that would be quite hard to do in the current GA. So if you have questions that you struggle to answer with the current GA because of it only has so many different menus and formats, the new GA is much more freeform. You can say, show me people who wear black on Tuesday and go to this page on Wednesday and then go to all these scenario modeling things is quite cool. I wouldn't replace it yet, but if you're running, say, Google Tag Manager or something similar, it should be relatively straightforward to run them both in parallel, and there's no huge downside to doing that. And then you can start to get used to the interface, start using it a bit, as long as you remember that the numbers might not be completely accurate because you won't be able to do things like copy your filters across and some more advanced setups like that. But if you've got a fairly basic setup, just run them both until you're comfortable switching over.
I have an answer for that. Norwegian support is coming early in 2021. So it is on our roadmap, and our Lingo team is constantly adding languages. And it will get there, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you for looking that up. Meanwhile, also related to the new analytics, it's about, is there no way to track conversions with SDK Firebase or Tag Manager?
I would need to double check. It's been a while since I set it up. When I did set up the beta originally, you needed to set it up through a Firebase account, but I got the impression that was a temporary thing. I'm pretty sure we were tracking goals in our account when we had it set up in the beta via events, but yeah, I need to go double check, but it sounds like you've already looked, so go and see if that's changed. Sorry. Do my homework better next time.
These are pretty hard questions.
Yeah, I figured a technical one every now and then.
We're absolutely fine with technical questions.
We also have a question on the new 2021 theme that I liked a lot. Can I change from Fluda, which is probably current theme, to the 2021 theme without problems?
I've learned to never say yes to that immediately, even though my gut instinct tells me yes. You should probably just download it, install it, try it in the customizer, because you can't just try it and without activating it. See if it works for you. And then if it works and if you can click around, then you can just switch over. If it doesn't work for you, tell us what doesn't work in GitHub. I think we've shared the 21 link on both YouTube and Facebook just now, but it's on github.com/WordPress/2021. Or just try it, and if there's bugs that you find, we'd love to hear about it, because we'll fix them before WordPress 5.6 is released.
Awesome. So moving to a slightly more general question. When a website is under construction and Google is not indexing the website, if we delete a page on our website, do we still need to redirect that page?
No.
That's a short one.
But what you do need to think about is if you have links pointing to that page, you need to change those too.
Or let it do the redirect and don't tidy those up. But yeah, definitely better to go and actually change them.
All right. Let me scroll a bit because a lot was happening in the chat. Oh, this is a nice question. I think you will like this very much, Jono. How important is Facebook for a B2B business?
Very good question. I think we increasingly live in an age where there's no such thing as B2B. We have humans trying to convince other humans to change their behavior and do things. And I think in which case CEOs and decision makers and purchasing managers still watch cat videos. They still binge Star Trek on Netflix. They're still exposed to adverts. They still make complex purchase decisions and journeys. I think the only big difference still is that these types of decisions take longer and involve more people, which is more reason to influence people socially and to be present and useful in these kinds of places. I think if you want to be convincing humans to do things, then stepping away from the places where those humans form opinions feels like a bad plan.
All right. And circling back to WordPress.org, Tom asks, can you please explain a bit more in detail the URL structure? And can you visualize the example?
I can, if you can share my screen a bit. Yes. So this is athens.wordcamp.org, which, as you can see here now, is 2019. So this used to be literally until a few months ago, because this one we switched over early, this. And the difference is that this, a subdomain, is an entirely new site for Google. So Google watches each and every one of these and views them as separate sites. Whereas now the 2019 site and the 2018 site and the 2017 site are all on the same athens.wordcamp.org domain, so they strengthen each other. And one of the problems that we had was that we always had the previous WordCamp outrank the upcoming WordCamp. And now we can actually steer that a lot better. There's still work to do here. Yeah, there's still a lot more work to do, but this step was very required to fix all this. There's a lot of WordCamps in the world, like 300 to 400 a year, I think, now. I might be wrong in that, Taco. You know those numbers better than I do. You're in that team.
I don't think I know them by heart. Sorry.
But there's a lot. So there's a lot of WordCamps, and because they were all creating new sites every year, it became harder and harder for these sites to get indexed, to the point where new WordCamps would not get their site indexed in Google before the event happened.
Yeah.
So that was quite a huge SEO problem, which Jono and I have been trying to solve for the last year. This step is huge, and now there's more work to do to fix the final other steps.
Very cool.
The address to download 2021, you can just go to the 2021 GitHub here, and then here you see code, and you can just click download. And then you download the zip, and this is an installable zip.
Very nice.
So this works. Sweet. Because this is what I've been doing for the last few weeks. And the funny thing is that now, if you upload that zip in WordPress, as of the previous version of WordPress, you can just upload it, and it'll ask whether you want to replace the active theme, and it will just do that. So that works, and it's awesome.
All right, and I see we have a slightly off-topic question, but nonetheless important one. Where was it again? It was asking about your chair, Joost, because they're looking for new office chairs, but I'm now
I'll be honest. Yeah. This is a gaming chair. I honestly don't know the model by heart. But you're free to look at it. It's a Titan, I think. I can see now because I'm standing up and I can now read it. But it is, Yeah, it is very, very nice to sit in when you have to sit in your office for far too long. Then it's very nice. So much for product placement.
Covering the important stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm drinking Coca-Cola Light for those of you.
All right. I think we're pretty much there. If you want to get your question in, now there's your final chance. Be quick. We're monitoring both Facebook and YouTube. So we'll be back with a new webinar next month.
Looking forward to it already.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be loads of new stuff.
Yeah, they keep promising it will be a quick one, and then we still need the full hour every time. So
yeah, sorry, it's not going to change. Do tell us what you think of the new way of streaming this. If you've been here before through Zoom, we're now using a different system, as you've seen, and well, if you have opinions about that, we'd like to hear about it.
Yeah.
All right, I think we do have a very last-minute final question. Can we still do that?
You sure?
All right. So let me show it on the screen. Why do you use tags and not categories in the Yoast URL structure?
Great question.
So on Yoast.com, I assume you mean Nico, so we've chosen there to use tags, but we also slightly reconfigured them. So our tags can have parents and child relationships, whereas normal tags in WordPress cannot. It's simply because we were doubling up on those. So we had an SEO tag and an SEO category, which is a very common problem in a lot of WordPress sites. And there was really no reason to have both for us. So we decided to ditch categories and use tags entirely.
And the part of that thinking is we also have lots of different types of things on Yoast.com. We have blog posts and help articles and courses and plugins. And a course might be about technical SEO and a help article might be about technical SEO. And we wanted to be able to manage those relationships to allow people to navigate around. So tags make much more sense for that kind of horizontal connections and navigation, whereas categories are very much which bucket should this post be in, which didn't make sense for us to be thinking in that way for our content.
No, and it's also so we have all our post types configured to all use post tag as their taxonomy. So, but yeah, that is a pretty specific WordPress configuration where you have, like we do, like 20 different custom post types.
All right, and with that, we're really at the end of this webinar. Thank you everyone for joining, and hope to see you again next month.
Good work, everyone. Thank you very much.
I can't do this with left, but
yeah, very nice. So Picard was great, but the new enterprise is not.
Yeah. Well, we disagree, but I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm disagreeing on that. Hey, cheers, everyone. Bye.
See you.